It's quite an ambitious plan to go all electric by 2030 for new cars, and of course it takes longer for the stock to turn over and for all cars to be electric. But in any case, it's very ambitious. But I don't think it's impossible. I think what it's going to take is steady improvement of the technologies and for them to become cheaper, and that basically somewhere between 2020 and 2025 we need to see what you might call a tipping point where many more people around India, not to mention other countries, suddenly are very interested in the technology and want to go electric. And that could happen, but I think by no means is that likely, except if maybe you have very strong policies to try to support it, like big subsidies on those vehicles. I think that a hybrid strategy is a good one. Hybrids are the most efficient types of internal combustion engine vehicles, and are a good step toward, you could have a hybrid strategy, and then you can have a plug-in hybrid strategy that gives you some electric range, and then go to full battery electric vehicles. However, a hybrid strategy still means you're completely dependent on oil, and I think these days it might be very interesting to just leapfrog right to the electric car and get off of oil faster and go to a very efficient vehicle system faster. But it is more challenging, and it's a bigger transition, and you have to make sure your electricity system is capable of managing that. And with a coal-dominated power system, the electric vehicles will not give you much benefit for climate, but they still should give you some important benefits for air quality, urban air quality, because you're removing the emissions in cities. And of course, it depends a bit on where your coal plants are, but in general, it should give you some benefits. But I think the hope would be that by 2030, you've also made a lot of progress cleaning your power sector and getting many more renewables, and India's growing its renewable sector very fast now. So you try to do them at the same time, because it's going to, even if you don't succeed in completely transitioning to electric vehicles by 2030, you should be able to be most of the way there, and at the same time you hope that you've made a lot of progress on cleaning the power, cleaning the grid, and that goes nicely together. That's always possible, and I would say that on electric vehicles, what does become obsolete is the vehicles themselves become obsolete. They have been, in a sense, becoming a little obsolete because the newer ones are so much better. So when your technology, it's like computers. When your technology is improving so fast, suddenly a 3 or 5 year old model feels old. And for example, with electric vehicles, the newer ones, at least in the United States and Europe, have a lot better range, a lot better driving range than 3 or 4 years ago. So that's going to happen. We're going to see the technology improving. But we don't expect to see a shift away from lithium-ion for quite some time. That basic technology is going to be with us for at least 10, 15 more years. But you're right, there could be other technologies that emerge that compete with battery electric vehicles, and probably the most likely one is fuel cell hydrogen vehicles. But I don't really think fuel cell hydrogen vehicles are likely to be an important competitor for 5 to 10 more years. So we'll see how that goes. The U.S., Germany, Japan, there's a lot of action on that technology. But for example, in the United States right now, we have about close to 1 million electric vehicles and only a few thousand hydrogen vehicles. So it's kind of behind. It's way behind in terms of its development and penetration. And I think it's very possible that we'll see electric vehicles keep improving to the point where it's hard for anything else to really compete with them. I think the most likely scenario is that by 2030, they are the dominant, or they become the dominant technology. Well, I think in the Indian context, we may find that a lot of the early cost-effective applications of battery electric vehicles will be in fleets. Anyone who drives a lot will be able to pay back that higher cost because they're saving so much money on the energy. And households typically are not driving enough to get that return. So if you look in Europe and the United States, maybe Japan, you're seeing it's mostly wealthy households that don't mind spending extra for whatever reason. They like those vehicles. They do drive beautifully. They're great vehicles, typically the electric drive vehicles. But no, they're not really breaking even. They're spending more money on their cars. And I know Indian consumers are going to be really careful and very cost sensitive. So that might be more like China. And what's interesting in China is that they're getting success on electric vehicles partly because they're not allowing people to buy gasoline or diesel vehicles in some cities. They're limiting the numbers. And so if you want any car, you're going to have to buy an electric car. And there are a range, and I'm sure it's going to be like this in India. As you get more models available, there will become some more cheaper city cars. And in China, there's a certain number that are what they call neighborhood electric vehicles. They don't even have a certification for going on the highway. And it's not clear what role those vehicles will play. But for now, in some cities and towns around China, those are becoming popular. So I think it'll be a combination of maybe policy that pushes. I think the best policy is not to ban any kind of vehicles, but it's to create incentives, create price incentives to make it cheaper to buy the electric vehicles, maybe by taxing the most high fuel using gasoline and diesel vehicles and using that funds like a fee bait to rebate the cost of the electrics. And I don't know if India's thinking about that, but that would be, if I was in the Modi government, I might be thinking that that's a nice complement and a way to try to reach those targets.